I'm Rick Harp. This is your APTN News Brief for Tuesday, January 30th. We lead off in Manitoba, where RCMP Major Crimes Services has released new information on a historical homicide investigation dating back to 2007. Now a man has been charged in connection with the death of 26-year-old Crystal Saunders, a Métis woman from Winnipeg. Tamara Pimentel has more.
It's been almost 17 years since Crystal Saunders went missing from Winnipeg and found dead near St. Ambrose, Manitoba, a day later. On Friday, RCMP arrested Kevin Q in Vancouver and charged him with second-degree murder for Saunders' death.
Crystal was a mother, she was a daughter, and a friend to many that needlessly lost her life to violent crime. Crystal also struggled. She was exploited and had issues with addictions. Unfortunately, Crystal was a vulnerable person, and someone took advantage of that.
In April 2007, Saunders was last seen by an on-duty Winnipeg police officer in Winnipeg's West End. The next morning, she was found by an off-duty RCMP officer who was checking his trap line. DNA evidence led to Q's arrest. MMIW advocate Sandra Delaronde credits Project Devote, a team of investigators from Winnipeg Police and Manitoba RCMP.
It is such good news for the family and for our community that Project Devote works, and it's an important part for families and communities in resolving cases in this province.
Delaronde says the news about Saunders brings closure and hope to Indigenous communities in Manitoba. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Still in that province, a First Nations man is dead following an interaction with Winnipeg Police Service early Saturday morning. An incident captured on video recorded on a bystander's device. The disturbing footage appears to show officers carrying an unresponsive 35-year-old James Wood to a police cruiser. And according to the force, police were called just after midnight Saturday morning by Wood's girlfriend. She said he was intoxicated and worried for her children's safety. Minutes later, another caller in the area said Wood had collapsed in an outdoor parking lot. Arriving soon after, officers then restrained Wood. Winnipeg Police Chief Danny Smythe.
Certainly we're aware that things can occur or be captured in little snippets online, and a whole narrative could take off without anybody really knowing what occurred. I think it's important that we try to provide some context, but also respecting the fact that IAU still has to investigate it. So it's a balancing act between trying to provide enough information to the public, but respecting the integrity of the investigation.
To Alberta, where the man convicted of manslaughter in the 2011 death of Cindy Gladue has lost his appeal for a new trial. Gladue bled to death in an Edmonton hotel after a sexual encounter with Bradley Barton. And in a unanimous decision, the Alberta Court of Appeal upheld Barton's 12-and-a-half-year sentence. Cindy's mother, Donna McLeod, says she hopes the ruling means her daughter's spirit can now rest. In a statement, Gladue's family says they're deeply relieved by the decision and have asked for privacy. Still in that province, where a family hit with the horrific loss of a husband and father now faces another blow. It was 4 years ago that Sarah Sampson's husband, Jacob Sansom, and his uncle were both brutally shot and killed. Now their daughter has been diagnosed with a degenerative disease. With more, Chris Stewart.
In March of 2020, Jacob Sansom and his uncle Maurice Cardinal lost their lives in rural Alberta. The two Métis men were hunting when an altercation with two men, Roger Bilodeau and his son, Anthony Bilodeau, ended with both Jacob and Maurice being shot and left to die. Both Roger and Anthony Bilodeau are in prison for their deaths. It was a huge blow to the close-knit Sansom family, whose lives were forever changed. Now, more pain for Sarah Sampson, Jacob Sampson's widow, and her kids. Their oldest daughter, 16-year-old Sierra, has been diagnosed with Friedreich's ataxia. It is an incurable, degenerative disease that damages the spine, nerves, and parts of the brain. It affects people's ability to walk, can cause vision and hearing loss, affects speech, and can damage the heart. Sarah says Sierra has been showing signs for almost a decade that doctors could not find a diagnosis. And after Jacob's death, she says her deterioration quickened.
Before he died, she was still able to dance. She was still able to ride a bike. Over the last few years, it's to the point where she cannot walk half a block. She falls over very easily. She loses her balance. She gets fatigued incredibly quickly, even walking up and down the stairs in her home.
The condition will have her in a wheelchair in her 20s, and currently there is no known cure.
Knowing she's never going to dance again, knowing she's never going to ride a bike. Her dreams of being a biologist in Australia, she can't do those things anymore.
But to help her stay mobile now, the family have ordered a wheelchair, and it will arrive in the next 6 weeks.
She's a pretty strong kid. Asking how she's doing about it, her biggest thing is she cannot wait for this wheelchair so that she can hang out with her friends again. She can go to the mall, she can go to the zoo, she can actually be mobile.
A friend of Jacob's created a GoFundMe to help the now single mother and widow pay the bills. She works 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Her doctor advised her to quit at least one.
Already with the 2 jobs and all the hours I'm able to work now, I'm barely making ends meet. And if I have to quit even cut down hours, it's going to make it so I can't make ends meet.
Donations have been coming in, but not nearly enough to help long term. She is asking for the public's help.
With all these appointments and everything, and I'm already exhausted. I'm done. I'm like, how am I going to continue to work 2 jobs, take time off at both jobs for all these appointments, court, everything else, because I still have court. We still have appeals. We still have parole board hearings.
Sarah says any donation amount helps. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Calgary.
And finally, we're now into week 3 of the inquest into the 2022 mass stabbings on and near James Smith Cree Nation, a week that began with testimony from the Parole Board of Canada. Rachel May reports.
Monica Irfin with the Parole Board of Canada took the stand to explain why Miles Sanderson was not in prison when he killed 11 people and injured another 17 in September 2022. Irfin said that the Parole Board of Canada considered Sanderson an excessive risk, but added conditions to his release, which he would later breach. He was supposed to abstain from drugs and alcohol, having relationships with women approved, and not associating with people consuming substances or committing crimes. Despite a recommendation that Sanderson be returned to prison, the parole board released him again, stating that his risk was being managed with his conditions. Kim Bowden is National Vice Chief of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples. He's been observing the inquest. He says jury recommendations can make a difference.
They can make a difference in terms of policy changes, for example, within corrections would be a big one.
Bowden says that the system needs to follow through on the jury's recommendations, unlike in previous inquests.
A lot of times when there's recommendations, they tend not to be followed. 2
elders with Correctional Services Canada spoke today about Sanderson's involvement with cultural practices and his healing plan to address his anger issues prior to release. The inquest is expected to wrap up, but could possibly go later into the week. Rachel May, APTN National News, Melfort, Saskatchewan.
And that's your APTN News Brief for Tuesday, January 30th. I'm Rick Harp.